Well, I feel like I'm following Patrick Henry, the Virginia Convention, give me liberty or give me death. So I think we all owe great debt of gratitude to Mr. Nader and his brave remarks. I think we all agree he deserves an obelisk adjacent to the Washington Monument for the countless things that he has done in his career. Let me begin by reciting the first verses of Ralph Waldo Emerson's Concord Hymn. By the rude bridge that arched the flood, their flags to April's breeze unfurled. Here once the embattled farmer stood and fired the shot heard round the world. We're here today to emulate the shot heard round the world by, for the first time in history, walking an empire back from the abyss of disaster. History does not repeat itself, but it rhymes. Caesar had his Brutus. Charles I had his Cromwell. King George III had the 56 signatories to the Declaration of Independence who signed their death warrants in order to establish a country based upon unalienable rights to everyone, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, fortified by government by the consent of the governed, and the rule of law. Through a blitzkrieg of words and deeds, President Donald Trump has evinced a design to overthrow the Constitution he has sworn to uphold and defend by force, violence, or chicanery in favor of a dictatorship evocative of Hitler, Stalin, and Mao Zedong. Expect Mr. Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act to deploy the military to disrupt or obstruct the midterm elections in November. He's flirted with that idea before, and I believe that when he sees the desperate straits the Republicans are confronting, he will not shy from that move. He already opined in January, and this was not a Freudian slip. Quote, when you think of it, we shouldn't even have an election. That sounds like Adolf Hitler after January 30th of 1933 and the Enabling Act. Let's begin with Mr. Trump's words. On July 23rd, 2019, as Ralph has recited, Mr. Trump proclaimed, quote, then I have Article 2, where I have the right to do anything I want as president. There's nothing ambiguous in that statement. Then he reiterated the same idea to the New York Times. The only constraint on his power is his moral conscience, his own mind, nothing else. The Constitution is not a constraint. International law is not a constraint. That's the only thing that constrains him. Again, I draw an analogy. That's Der Führer principle of the Third Reich. Well, let's consider the restraint of Mr. Trump's morality. You remember January 6th of 2021, when Mr. Trump was informed that his insurrectionists were chanting, hang Mike Pence, to prevent him from counting state-certified electoral votes under the 12th Amendment and the Electoral Count Act. Mr. Trump's response, he deserves it. That's his moral conscience. John Kelly reports that Mr. Trump volunteered to him, well, Hitler did a lot of good things. He didn't identify them. Maybe Dachau, Bergen-Belsen, the extermination camps. Then we have Mr. Trump's words to 90 million Iranians on April 7th, 2026. Quote, a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again, end quote. These are not words that are ambiguous. If that doesn't evince a design of tyranny or genocide, I don't know what does. He's voiced open skepticism of his duty to obey his constitutional oath, to uphold and defend the Constitution. He sneered at due process with regard to immigrants, saying, well, there's so many of them. We can't have hearings. It would take too long. So, like the Queen of Hearts and Ventures and Alice in Wonderland, off with their heads, right? Sometimes they just end up in dungeons in El Salvador. President Trump's actions, however, match his alarming words. He is, as we speak right now, we are a country engaged in a criminal, unconstitutional war of aggression against Iran. The president has initiated this war on his own without a congressional declaration. Moreover, there is no plausible claim of self-defense any more than Adolf Hitler claimed self-defense for invading Poland, the Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark, Norway, Yugoslavia in World War II. Well, what was the result of Mr. Hitler's wars of aggression? There's a Nuremberg tribunal that we orchestrated after World War II and sentenced the Nazis like Hermann Goering and Joachim von Ribbentrop to death for participating in wars of aggression, which were defined, and we defined them, wars not in self-defense. And no plausible claim can be made. We're fighting Iran in self-defense. We have 5,000 nuclear warheads, the biggest war machine ever. We're joined by Israel, which probably has 300 or 400 nuclear warheads. Iran has none. Iran is not an expanding power. And this is self-defense. Again, it is the idea that Adolf Hitler used over and over again. Every war he fought in World War II was in self-defense. Danzig was the alpha and omega of Germany's existence. But he is also, in conducting the war, is committing war crimes, targeting civilians like the elementary school children killed in Iran, acting in cahoots with Israel. And he's not stopped just at Iran. We know that he also is invaded, and it's amazing how little reporting has been done to this, in Venezuela. We sent the military to kidnap Mr. Maduro, the president, bring him here. Maybe there'll be a trial, maybe not. It probably violates an arbitration treaty in 1922, but putting that aside. He used the military. They killed scores of Cuban and Venezuelan military. And this is his theory that he used to justify the invasion. That those persons who he says are engaged in drug trafficking are at war. They're invading the United States. They're shooting missiles at us. They're dropping bombs at us. Who knows, they could be ready to burn the Congress and the White House like the British in the War of 1812. I mean, this is a page out of Franz Kafka's The Trial. If you read Franz Kafka's Trial, you know what I'm talking about. Complete derangement. At war? You kidding? Then he says, we're in charge. He's annexed Venezuela. Now, when we annexed Hawaii and other territories, we had to have Congress pass a statute. But he unilaterally said, no, Venezuela's annexed. I'm going to decide when they can hold elections. Really? He's taking the money that's being earned from Venezuelan exports, and Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, is deciding, I'll decide how to spend it. Where's the reporting on this, you know? He's acting as proconsul, like he was in the middle of the Roman Empire. And that's not the only, we know that there are additional ambitions that Mr. Trump has. He says he's going to seize Greenland, probably going to try to obtain sovereignty over the Panama Canal again. Maybe we'll be invading Cuba as a second edition of the Bay of Pigs disaster, after Marco Rubio came out with this fantastical claim that our greatest, not quite greatest, second greatest threat to our survival after Antifa, which has no bank account or membership, is Cuba, right? We've been trying to overthrow that government there at least since 1961. Additionally, we haven't even mentioned Mr. Trump, but he's in peri delicto with President Biden. former President Biden, is helping and participating in genocide of Palestinians in Gaza. Then he has taken a page, or a clip from The Godfather. He's assassinating fishermen, anyone he says in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific that he thinks is drug smuggling. Not only, and they also have suddenly become an armed force. They're invading the United States. And think of his Alice in Wonderland, the Mad Hatter's Tea Party's logic. Well, they're trying to sell fentanyl. People are buying it. They're overdosing on it. So instead of going after the users who are providing material assistance to the drug traffickers, we kill the drug traffickers. And there's no limiting principle, ladies and gentlemen. There's nothing that says, could say anybody in the world, you're now invading the United States. You deny it, says, well, I see it even if you don't. So we're going to use the military and exterminate you. These things move by inches. When power is at stake, it only moves in one trajectory. More and more until there's pushback. Unfortunately, we've seen what happened in one instance in the Third Reich. It took extermination camps in World War II to push back finally, but there was a lot of misery in the interim. We don't want to risk that again. Now, I would say that Mr. Trump, again, comparing with the Third Reich, I think he's gone beyond. You know, Adolf Hitler had his Lebensraum, but that was at least short of planetary expansion. I think Trump wants to expand his authority to every corner of the world. Remember what he said about Greenland. It's not enough that we have access to Greenland for whatever military purpose we want. I need the tangible feeling that I own it, you know? He needs to own the planet for whatever juvenile gratification he gets from ownership. The other issues I don't need to repeat with regard to his violation of the duty to faithfully execute the laws. He views his obligation to faithfully undercut and subvert the laws. When there are violations, he doesn't prosecute them. And when there aren't violations, he makes up violations, like Letitia James and with regard to James Comey and these other things. They're simply hallucinations. Fortunately, he's losing most of those in court now, but we know what his intent is. James Madison explained that the power of the purse was the final check that the Congress would have on the president. You know how Vietnam War ended because Congress enacted a law saying after August 15th in 1973, no monies of the United States can be expended to conduct combat operations over Indochina. End of war. They can still do that now. But of course, I think they're too weak and anemic since they've surrendered their power. I think Hakeem Jeffries is exemplary. And he thinks Congress should be the caboose, not the locomotive of the government. And we know what the caboose is. It follows. We also have examples, again, based on the national emergencies that were invoked under the Weimar Constitution by Adolf Hitler. Mr. Trump invokes national emergencies, energy emergencies, border emergencies, everything to justify circumventing the Posse Comitatus Act that says it's supposed to be civilian supremacy over the military and civilian law enforcement. So he sends the military, or de facto National Guard, into various cities claiming that regular law enforcement is not adequate in these jurisdictions, although everybody who's in the jurisdiction says they are adequate. It's mixed record in the courts now, but we know, I believe, that the likelihood is frightening that somewhere before November voting this year, Mr. Trump will declare a national emergency. Remember those vulnerabilities we heard about last week in China? Maybe they could happen. They're going to try to fix the voting machines, and therefore, military has to go in and seize the machines, prevent ballots from being counted for some indefinite purpose. The fact that I can make that remark and not have you all laughing at me is really alarming, because you know it's credible. I'm not making this up. To long endure, self-government, the rule of law, must constantly struggle against the human propensity towards absolutism, the lust for limitless power. It's what member Henry Kissinger said. It's the greatest aphrodisiac, power. Citizens must take alarm at the first encroachment on their liberties. Through what? Informed voting, public advocacy, town halls, and the courage to declare the emperor has no clothes. As President Abraham Lincoln put it, in a similar time of crisis during the Civil War, we, the people of the United States, all of us, will either nobly save or meanly lose the last best hope on earth. But I think it may be even more alarming than Mr. Lincoln put it. Civilization itself summons us to display the wisdom and strength necessary to arrest and defeat Mr. Trump's dictatorship, counter-revolution against July 4, 1776, through impeachment and removal from office. Like Adolf Hitler, President Trump is an existential threat to humanity. His narcissism is infinite. He is without scruples against nuclear war to extinguish the species if denied absolute power. We, the living, are saddled with a duty to act without weary to ensure the deaths and sacrifices of our forefathers were not in vain. Let it be said, if the United States endures for another 10,000 years, this was its finest hour. If not us, who? If not now, when? Thank you. And I'm going to I would like to also volunteer my great gratitude for the other members of Congress, Al Green, Steve Cohen, who will be appearing later. I want to offer special gratitude to Jason Watson. He's a major in the Air Force who has put his liberty on the line to protest Trump's unconstitutional and criminal actions. I want to thank and express my gratitude to everyone here in the audience. I feel a little bit like Henry V before, we few, we happy few, we band of brothers. And finally, I want to repeat, because it can't be done enough. Ralph Nader truly should be an inspiration for the ages and for all of us. Despite, you wouldn't know his age. It's like he's there able to run a marathon when it comes to liberty and doing the right thing. So I think we should take a page from his life, and at least for this period of time, work until we impeach and remove President Trump from office. Thank you. Guess we're reconvening here. So it's my privilege to introduce a very courageous, fearless member of Congress, Shri Thanedar from Michigan. I've had an earlier opportunity to meet in his office. I was very impressed with his sense of duty to the Constitution, irrespective of the consequences for himself. I think he represents, among other things, that the United States is great because we welcome everybody, no matter what their background, no matter what their gender, as long as you believe in the Constitution in the United States of America, to do the right thing, unalienable rights. That is the epitome of America. And I just want to repeat before he makes his presentation that that's why we have risen so fast, but we do not want to fall. In the eyes of the Constitution, in the eyes of the law, we're one race, we're one religion, we're one gender, we're one nationality. American. We hang together or we hang separately. So, Shri, I'd like to introduce you now. He's had a very, very wonderful career in the United States Congress. And even if at present he's not a majority, remember we're very thankful for Wayne Morris and Ernest Gruning in 1964, the 2 votes against the Vietnam War, vindicated by history. I think the same will be said for Shri. Thanks. Make a presentation.
Thank you, Bruce, and good afternoon to all of you. Thank you. Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you for being here. These are tough times and calls for a tougher action. I am an immigrant. I was growing up in poverty, working as a janitor while going to college, taking care of my family when my father lost his job, 6 sisters and a brother. And then I got admission into a PhD program here in the United States. And I came to US with a student visa with $20 in my pocket. Wow. And like Bruce said, this is a great country. Our country has welcomed immigrants with open arms, and the immigrants have contributed substantially to the greatness of the United States of America. We are a great country because what our relationship with our immigrant community and their struggle and their fight to make this a win-win situation for the United States and the immigrants. So I am just grateful, I'm honored, Bruce, to be here in the United States Congress. When I landed at New York in my sandals and sweater back then, 1979, we didn't have Google then, and I couldn't tell what the weather was in New York City. It was 10 below. Because when they say it's cold in India, we wear a sweater. So that brought me to US. I got my education, then was able to start a small business, and felt I achieved my American dream. I got a lot of help. I worked hard, but I achieved my American dream, and I felt I got to go help others achieve their American dream, because in Detroit, I saw many people, 30% of my constituents living under poverty. And these are the people I felt don't have access to the American dream. And it is my job to go help them not accumulate wealth. So I let go my business, sold it, took some of the money, gave it to all of my employees, and then said, I am going to go help my constituents. And I was fortunate to be able to be in Congress to represent great cities of Detroit and downriver communities, all of Michigan's 13th congressional district. So thank you for inviting me here. I'm Congressman Shri Thanedar, and I'm proud to represent Michigan's 13th congressional district. Right now, we have a president who has repeatedly broken the law, abused the power of his office, and he puts his own interest ahead of the American people. People are angry, people are frustrated, and tired of watching Donald Trump act as though the law does not apply to him. I understand that frustration because I share it. I'm just as angry. And when I was walking the streets, protesting, agitating in the streets of Detroit on the No King's Day, where millions of people showed up across this country. And when we fight, we win. When we fight, when atrocities like this happen, I admire and appreciate all of your activism and all the people that showed up on the streets of Detroit protesting the misuse of power by this president. Trump has trampled on the Constitution, defied court orders, abused his authority, and weakened the checks and balances that protect our democracy. I am not sitting quietly while this happens. I am fighting back. We all are fighting back, right? In March 2025, I became the first member of Congress during Trump's second term to introduce articles of impeachment against him. I took that step because of his illegal blanket tariffs and his attempt to declare English the official language of the United States. Also, he has misused his office for personal gain, gaining over $1 billion for himself and his family, illegally using his office. So when I introduced those articles of impeachment, the very next week, Mr. Trump came to Michigan, very close to my congressional district. In a public meeting, he talked about me as the lunatic from Michigan. Lunatic, that's what he called me. And I wear that title proudly. In April this year, I wrote to members of President's cabinet and called on them to remove him from office because he is clearly unfit to serve. When a president threatens our safety, economy, and democracy, Congress and the cabinet have a duty to act. Trump has now dragged the United States into an illegal war with Iran without authorization from Congress and without a clear plan. He has sent the cost of basic goods soaring for American families while showing little concern for people struggling to pay their bills. He just says affordability crisis that we have currently is a hoax. And he also said, I don't care about the price increases. He's also posted disturbing messages, altered images, and AI-generated videos on social media. This behavior is not responsible or worthy of the office that he holds. When Trump posted that a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again, in reference to the Iranian people, I heard from my constituents frightened by the threat of a wider and more deadly war. Congress did not authorize this war. The American people do not want this war. Yet the administration continues to expand the conflict and send Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to Congress to demand even more money. Mr. Hegseth is asking for $37.5 billion for this war, and I voted hell no on that. Not a penny for this war. I also voted no against the defense budget, which is nearly $1 trillion, the highest defense budget we have ever had. And you know what? I'll tell you an inside secret here. Pentagon has never passed an audit. Never. Never passed an audit. So I'm a businessman. When you don't pass an audit and you're driving your organization to near bankruptcy with your policies, why would you fund such department with $1 trillion? We must be out of our mind. So I'll continue to fight, and I'll continue to oppose this huge defense spending that makes absolutely no sense. Secretary Hegseth is not qualified to lead the Department of Defense. His record includes the killing of civilians on a boat near Venezuela and sharing sensitive military discussions in a private signal chat that included a journalist. You know, that is a blatant disregard to the lives of our service members. That signal chat that he shared, our plans, our war plans, our strategies, put our members of our team, their lives in danger. And that's why I brought in articles of impeachment against Pete Hegseth. Yeah? All right, he needs to go. You know, we worked on, and Pam Bondi's gone. We worked on it, and Kristi Noem is gone. And now we got to get rid of many of the rest of the cabinet members, starting with Pete Hegseth. Yeah. This is a completely incompetent and corrupt administration that needs to go. That needs to go, including Mr. Trump. So in November, when we flip the United States Congress, make Hakeem Jeffries our next speaker, one of the agenda has to be is holding this administration accountable, holding this president accountable, and ensuring that even though Kristi Noem is gone, we haven't forgotten her corruption. Hundreds of millions of dollars that she awarded to her friends in terms of DHS contracts. And we got to hold her responsible to the point that some of these cabinet members must serve some time to answer for their illegal actions and misuse of their offices. The Trump administration has also weaponized the Department of Justice. Congress voted for the full release of Epstein files, but millions of records have not been released. That is why I introduced articles of impeachment against Attorney General Pam Bondi. The public deserves transparency, and the survivors deserve truth, accountability, and justice. And all Pam Bondi for their atrocious activity. Trump is also responsible for immigration operations. We do not know the full number of deaths because this administration refuses to provide meaningful transparency and accountability. Let me be clear. Who All right, now you can hear me. All right, let me be clear. If Trump truly respected law enforcement, he would not have pardoned the January 6 rioters who attacked police officers and tried to overturn an election. He talked about law and order only when it benefits him. That is hypocrisy, not leadership. Even last week, instead of addressing the real problems Americans face, Trump gave another speech filled with false claims about election fraud. He continued to repeat the lie that the 2020 election was stolen, even though those claims have been rejected by courts, election officers, and members of his own administration. At the same time, he's pushing restrictions that make it harder for eligible Americans to vote. He even refused to sign a bipartisan housing bill that could help address the affordability crisis because Democrats and Republicans would not agree to pass his SAVE Act. Now, the SAVE Act is simply nothing but an attempt by this administration to suppress voting by minorities, suppress voting by women, and the SAVE Act must never become the law of the land. We must. Look, this is not just about political parties. It is about protecting our democracy, defending the Constitution, and preserving the rule of law. When a president violates his oath of office, Congress has a responsibility to act. I did not come to Congress to sit idly. I came here to fight for working families, for justice, and for the integrity of our democracy. Our democracy is not a playground for billionaires, corporations, or powerful politicians. It is a promise that government will serve the people, and I intend to keep that promise. Whether the fight is in Congress, in the courts, or in our communities, I will not back down. The truth still matters. The Constitution still matters. The American people still matter. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for joining this fight. And our fight is not done. Our fight is just began. We want to make sure that this president, his cabinet, his corrupt cabinet, is held responsible. And if I get reelected next term, I will have the opportunity to hold the gavel for the Oversight Committee on Homeland Security. And I intend to bring Kristi Noem back to my committee and hold her accountable for all of her corruptions and the atrocities and the murders ICE has created on our street. Thank you all. Thank you so much.
I'm inclined to remind myself of Winston Churchill during World War II. This is not the end, not the beginning of the end, but the end of the beginning, with members like Shri Thanedar and Steve Cohen, our next speaker. I think I recall Congressman Cohen receiving a call from you, this is years ago, asking, I think it was in an airport, we need to impeach and remove Alberto Gonzales, then Attorney General. You were brave then, and your bravery has not diminished since that time. I think Steve represents the best of Congress, fearlessness. That's what the framers understood was necessary if separation of powers is to work. And I think that despite the fact that the current leadership in the House basically has become an appendage to the White House, directly contrary to the separation, that Steve Cohen has stood out, has not succumbed, whether it's a Democrat or Republican in the White House. He's become a co-signatory of Congressman Larson's House Resolution 1155. So I think we all owe a debt. Mr. Cohen will not be returning in the next Congress, but perhaps we can reward his service by impeaching and removing Mr. Trump in 2027. Steve, come and explain your history, your devotion here. Thanks for making it. Thank you.
Here we go. Good afternoon. Good crowd of people. I was pleased to see it when I got here. You're obviously good Americans who want to see the rule of law prevail and Congress do its duties. When the Founding Fathers set up impeachment, it was set up, of course, to be a check on the executive and the check on the executive. And they thought that the House and the Senate would act as a group of basically, they're the Congress, an equal balance, an equal branch of government, and be a check on the executive if he got out of line. They didn't foresee the political parties getting to be so strong and where they are today, that it's more political with the parties being for or against impeachment than the Congress being for or against impeachment because of what has been done to their powers. Mike Johnson is a joke. He should be a, yep. He was my ranking member on the committee, the Judiciary Committee on Subcommittee on Civil Rights, Civil Liberties, and the Constitution. And he brought up all of his religious theories about everything. He ought to be a county commissioner in Bossier City, or Louisiana. The idea he's the speaker is a joke. He is just a lapdog for Trump and has no thought that we're an equal branch of government, and he has no thought that he's an equal branch of anything. He thinks he's a little guy, which he is, not a rich guy, not a powerful guy, and not a guy with any kind of self-esteem. And Donald Trump is a big guy, and he does whatever Donald Trump tells him to do. I know the late Lindsey Graham passed, and we should mourn every death. But Lindsey Graham was a rock compared to Mike Johnson. I filed impeachment articles this year against Chief Justice Roberts. And I don't know if it's the first time that impeachment articles have been filed against a Chief Justice or not. I've seen that on the internet. Some people claimed it. I haven't talked to Siri or Alexa to find out. But at least it's a mark on his record. He has been a lapdog to the Republicans, too. He stops Trump on certain types of cases like tariffs, where it's good for business. He sides with the commercial entities against Trump. But when it comes to democracy, he always goes with Trump. And somehow or another, he got the court to agree to give him immunity in his official capacities. I mean, he knew who the president was going to be, a criminal with expansive authorities or thoughts of his authorities, and a man who grabs power and doesn't retreat. Roy Cohn's student. Most of y'all look like you're old enough to know who Roy Cohn was. He was the worst Cohn ever. He was not a Conehead. Bad guy. And Trump just doesn't ever admit defeat, never admits he's wrong, and just fights on. He is the biggest threat to our democracy. So I filed that impeachment article against Justice Roberts. I'm a co-sponsor of Mr. Larson's impeachment resolution, and I may file my own. It's my last term. I've been 20 years up here. It's been a great 20 years, and I'm thankful for having it. But Donald Trump sent word down to Tennessee that he wanted, after the Calais decision, he wanted one more seat. He didn't want 10,000 or 11,000 votes like he wanted Georgia, but he wanted one seat. And the governor of Tennessee, Bill Lee, acted like he was Mike Johnson. And he did what Trump wanted. Bill Lee's going to be out of a job come January, just like I am. But Bill Lee's going to get a job from Donald Trump. You wait and see. He's going to be appointed to some major position. So he gets something out of it. The legislature did it, and they redistricted, and they took my district, which has been around forever, which has about 63% African-American vote. And they took the position that they could change that, and they did it, divided into 3 different districts with almost the exact amount of African-American vote in each district, and claimed they didn't take race into consideration. There was an expert witness on the last and final lawsuit that we had challenging their actions that the League of Women Voters and the ACLU brought, and their expert witness, who's got degrees from the finest schools in the country, I think it was Harvard, MIT, that type of place, said he ran computer models of how to redistrict my district and to make 3 new seats. And in none of the computer models, and he did about 1,000, he said, did it come out with numbers almost identical for blacks. But it came off almost identical for blacks, and they claimed they didn't consider race. Horse manure. And walking over here, I walked past a display in the hall of Congress. I guess it's the one that goes to the crypt. It was about the African-American legislators, congresspeople, first congressman, first senator. And it talked about some important court decisions. And it closed with the Civil Rights Act, statutory decisions too. Civil Rights Act was 1965. It was 65 or 64? 64. Thank you. Thank you. And it said that that was done so they wouldn't have these literacy tests, and African Americans have a better right to vote, and they could have better opportunities to elect folks because of in states. We had to get pre-clearance. States which had shown that they were discriminating based on race. Well, Mr. Alito said that doesn't exist anymore. Everything's fine, hunky-dory. All the legislatures in the South love African Americans, want to see them get all the opportunities they can ever have, don't have any understanding of history. And Tennessee was the first state to jump as soon as Calais was passed and Trump asked them to jump. They repealed a law that was passed in 1971, so it had been around for 55, 56 years, that said you can't redistrict between censuses. Gone. Zap. Good law. Didn't even think twice. They did it to help Trump. And then they did this decision in about 2 days. I think they had the maps already drawn. They sent the maps, as I understand it, up to Trump to clear them. He cleared them, and they came back and they did them. If Mr. Alito can't see what happened there, he can't see. He doesn't want to see race. He probably doesn't know race because he probably doesn't deal with those issues very much and doesn't think too much about African Americans. I understand the situation, and I know the mentality of a Tennessee General Assembly member. They're a lot like Alabama General Assembly members or legislatures in Louisiana. Some of them are fine. Most of them are nice fellas. Underneath their nice fellas, they're racist. They are racist. And you'll hear it. Sometimes they'll speak it. But they won't say the N-word, and they won't say, and to get under this new ruling in Calais, you've got to show actual, not implied racism. So they got to say the N-word like 17 times in a row, and then do a cartwheel, and then they'll consider it. It's a bad decision. It's a terrible court, and that was harmful. So anyway, with that little bit behind me, it's my last term, and I'm going to file my own resolution, just to go on record and let people know where I am. And my trusty judiciary aide has given me some notes here, and he gave me some examples of individual case situations that could be part of an impeachment resolution. I don't know if he worked hard enough on it or not, but he only came up with 24 instances. It's going to be a big one. When Trump spoke in Charlottesville, Virginia, or about Charlottesville, Virginia, and he said after the marchers there said, Jews will not replace us, and other things like that. At the time, I didn't know what the replacement theory was, since learned. And Trump said there were fine people on both sides. Well, watching television, I said, I got to file an impeachment resolution. My friend Nancy Pelosi, who I have great respect for and I revere, didn't want anybody to file an impeachment resolution. Nancy was a great speaker. Iron fist. She didn't want anybody to file an impeachment resolution. She wanted to do it. She wanted to determine, and maybe she had the best knowledge and the best strategy. Not that it worked, but maybe she did. But I called her. I picked up the phone. As Bruce told you, sometimes I'm brave. And I picked up the phone, and I called Nancy. I was really ready to go. And I got her answering service. That was good. And I left her a message. And I said, I've got to file an impeachment resolution. Charlottesville just was too much. I don't think she ever forgot that. And there's some things I asked for that I didn't get. And I think a lot of it had to do with that. But I was proud to do it. And I worked on it. And we had several articles and several instances. And I got 17 sponsors, including the great John Lewis, who didn't sponsor almost anything then. So we tried, and we had a press conference, and we did it. I suspect Donald Trump would have wanted a seat out of Tennessee after the Calais decision, regardless of who was in the seat. But I don't think it gave him any pause or concern to know he was putting me out of my seat. So it be. So I'm going to do the impeachment resolution. I think it's important that people go on record. You see evil. Sometimes you can't stop it. But if you go on record about citing it as evil and fighting, it makes a difference. And I'm going to be on record. Thank you very much. She's the best.
Thank you. I don't want any more introduction besides that. That's.
You got it. Yeah. So, Celinda is one who can discredit, I believe, the pretext that I think the Democrat leadership, or really the unleadership that likes to be the caboose rather than the locomotive, puts out, that why we can't go forward for impeachment because it means that there would be a huge turnout in favor of Republicans in November. But she is earthbound and is able, I think, to discredit that myth and give us even more encouragement that we're on the right path and enable us to confront the Democratic leadership and say, you're really being duplicitous here. We really should need new leadership in 2027. I mean, based upon what Steve said and Shri, I'm frightened if Hakeem Jeffries is the House Speaker in 2027, and he doesn't want to, he thinks he's getting out front by being the locomotive, excuse me, the caboose in the train. But anyway, Cecilia.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, and I think you've seen true moral leadership in the previous Congressman. First of all, I want to say that I'm so glad you all are here, and with things being as busy as they are, I know that time is one of the most precious resources we have, so thank you. And I hope all of you will do things to elect people who are supportive of impeachment. The second thing I want to say is, and these are all my notes, but I should tear up my notes, because you don't take a position on a moral issue like impeachment from polling data. And if a pollster tells you that, you know you really shouldn't take your position from polling data. But may I add to that, the public is way ahead of the leadership here. They have us said hello. They're yes. And there are some things that we could do to promote the message, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But be clear today, a solid majority of the public supports impeachment. All of the data shows that they are very unlikely to change their mind. Impeachment is highly correlated with job approval, which is tanked. And so there are a number of people, 14% of the public, who disapprove of the president and yet aren't quite ready for impeachment yet. So far from being an unpopular issue, it is a majority issue, and it is a majority issue where we have a lot of room to grow. If we picked up everybody who disapproved of the job that the president is doing, we would have 2/3 of Americans in favor of impeachment. We right now have 53 to 56% of Americans in favor of impeachment. So this is not a minority position. This is not a dangerous issue. Most politicians would be extremely happy to have 65% of the voters on their side. So let's talk a little bit about the data and what's the structure of the data. First, as I said, 53% of Americans support impeachment. It goes down 56%. It goes up as high as 56% when you remind people of anything that he has done. It is 51% when you say impeachment and removal. People are unclear that impeachment leads to removal, and of course they have the Clinton impeachment in their mind when they think about that. 45% of Americans oppose impeachment. It is very polarized. And if we had one thing to do, and I don't know if this is an impossible task, what would really move the public is if we could get some Republicans, and they could be local Republicans, they could be local elected officials, if we could get any Republicans in favor of impeachment. In the Nixon impeachment, we had quite a bit of data. People started out 63% opposed. People start out here 53% in favor. The thing that really brought them on board was Republicans and Democrats being together on the issue. And again, it doesn't have to be the most famous Republicans, and it's not going to be. 90% of Democrats support impeachment. So what is one of our biggest tasks? One of our biggest tasks in this upcoming election is to get everyone out to vote. And they know it. They're doing everything they can to disenfranchise the voters. And one thing I would say, let's not refer to the SAVE Act anymore. It's the Save Trump Act. It's not the SAVE Act, it's the Save Trump Act. And along with the doing away with the voting rights, they are doing away with the ability of married women to vote. And it's more Republicans who marry and change their names than Democrats who do. I think they are shown that not only are they racist, but they are sexist. And as one woman said in a focus group, they really do want to keep us in the kitchen and pregnant. Support 95% of Republicans oppose impeachment. Republicans who support impeachment have left and become independents. But here's the most important number that I'm going to give you, and that is that by over 20 points, independents and swing voters support impeachment. A solid majority of swing voters and independent voters support impeachment. It is not a dangerous political issue. It is actually a safe political issue. And if Donald Trump can't get out the vote, impeachment of Donald Trump is not going to get out the vote. They've already got their turnout strategy. We need a turnout strategy, and impeachment can be part of a very, very strong argument that really motivates Democratic voters. And it makes people think that you're a fighter. It makes people think that you're going to stand up and lead, be the locomotive, not the caboose. And it makes people really, really energized about talking to their friends and family. Politicians are doing impeachment hushing. They're saying, shh, don't say that. The public is very willing to pass on impeachment and impeachment information to their friends and family. And a third of the public gets their information from friends and family. Now, one of our strategies could be to get new friends and family, but that's going to be hard to do in 100 days. So maybe we should get into those friendship networks and make sure that our book club, our church club, our local chamber of commerce all has the information that I thought the toolkit out there back in the back room is fantastic and should be sent to everyone. Of those who oppose impeachment, 32% think the allegations might be true. So you've got lots of votes to go get. We're not done yet at 53 and 56%. We have 10, 15, 20% of the vote that we could still go get with an impeachment narrative. Leaders may not, so-called leaders, may not be able to volunteer what the president should be impeached about. The public, though, is quite clear. So 30% of the people said corruption and self-enrichment. That's primarily Democrats and African Americans. 30% said abuse of power and defying the courts. That's a lot of independents and some former Republicans. 20%, and I'm sure this number is higher now, should be impeached due to his decision to start an illegal war in Iran. And people now restart an illegal war in Iran and keep this war going in Iran, and then go ask, the war wasn't supposed to cost any money, and then go ask for $67 billion to continue the war in Iran. The American public is convinced now that the war will go on for at least another year. So I'm sure those numbers are higher today. What is interesting is Epstein is not as strong a criteria for impeachment in voters' minds, in part because they think it was a very bipartisan problem. That's a seminar for another day. But just as we're thinking, these are very hefty criticisms, though. An illegal war, enrichment, ignoring the courts and the Constitution. We're not talking about a minor conclusion that the voters flittingly came to. This is really weighty, heavy stuff. And the moment is now to emphasize this stuff as people are focused on the Constitution and people are focused on our anniversary. I can hardly say it. I had to leave town. The cage fight was enough for me. I couldn't stay for the 4th of July. So I went and looked for polar bears in the Arctic. Another story. One of the things we know is that opinions about impeachment, we don't have data for Andrew Johnson, but with Nixon and Clinton, the impeachment numbers and the approval numbers are they track very strongly together. Again, when Nixon started out, he had positive job performance. That's what lagged. And then people were people went from 23% for impeachment to 63%. With Clinton, they never supported impeachment, in part because they thought he was doing a good job. So if you could only find one number, if you only knew one number, and wanted to know whether impeachment would be popular or not in your district, you would ask Trump's job performance. Again, you shouldn't take your position on impeachment based on polling data, but if you were inclined to do so, Donald Trump today is double digits net negative in Alaska. He's double-digit net negative in Nebraska. He's double-digit net negative in Montana. We are not talking about Manhattan here. We are talking about solid Republican conservative states where his job approval is solidly net negative. This is not a dangerous issue. Some people say, well, we can't be out on it because it's likely to change. No, it's not. All of the historical data shows that for the views on impeachment to change, which they're very unlikely to in such a polarized time, your job performance has to improve. Well, so far I haven't seen him do anything to improve his job performance numbers, and you know the Republicans are scared to death of his current job performance numbers. What does impeachment do to feelings about Congress? That's another thing that people are worried about. It'll make people be negative about the institution. Well, that's an interesting hypothesis because 9% of people are positive about Congress today. So I would say it's probably hard to take that number down. You know, the mothers of Congress people still like them, but that is about it. So there's no question about raising or lowering the view of the institution. And what people are looking for is leaders and fighters and people with courage. So where are we at? We are at a situation where, yes, things are polarized. If we wanted to do two things to promote impeachment and make it even stronger than it is already, we would get some Republicans, even if they are local Republicans on board, or ex-Republicans, and we would tie it to the consequences for real people. Real people do want this election to be about their lives. So when the president ignores courts, farmers in my home state of Montana get in trouble because tariffs are killing them. And the courts have to come back and back and back and back again, and still are often ignored. So linking impeachment and the grounds for impeachment, which people themselves have come up with very weighty criteria, is a very powerful thing to improve the argument. So where do I leave you? There is strong support for impeachment. Okay, there we go. Thank you. Boy, you've been doing this all day, huh? How many speakers made that mistake? Thank you. Do you want to be president? We got our replacement candidate already. So conventional wisdom, what I love about polling is conventional wisdom is wrong about 90% of the time, plus or minus 5%. Beltway conventional wisdom is wrong about 100% of the time, plus or minus 5%. So everybody knows impeachment's unpopular. No, it's not. It's very popular. A majority of people support it. Everyone knows that it'll energize the other side. No, the other side, to the extent they're going to be energized, they're already energized. We need to energize our side. We need to get our people out to vote. And they have a choice, and they showed us that choice in 2024. Millions and millions of Democrats stayed home in 2024 in battleground states because they thought they had nothing to vote for. Everyone knows it's very volatile. No, it's not. Attitudes about impeachment track with job performance. I don't think there's anything the president can do to improve his job performance right now, and he's only got 100 days left, 100 days of things that'll probably take his job performance down. And finally, everybody knows that nobody understands impeachment. Well, frankly, voters understand it better than a lot of elected officials, and they can volunteer a lot of grounds for impeachment. So yet again, one of the reasons I love being a pollster, conventional wisdom is wrong, the voters are way ahead of the public, and let's go energize them by talking about this. Is there a question back there? Well, it's a great question. And I think, you know, I would love this Congressman's comment on that too. I think it's a question of, I think even the best of Congress people, Congressman Cohen accepted, get really out of touch with where the public is at and where their base is at. I think they think that Democrats have nowhere to go. Well, we're very interesting people, Democrats. We got a lot of things on our mind. We got a lot of places to go. We got things to do. I think they think that anti-Trump feeling will mobilize everyone anyway. We've got turnout problems right now. Yes, turnout was high in primaries, but it wasn't record high, and we need people to really turn out in record numbers. So I think that they're following leadership. I think that no one has presented this data to them. I think they have us captured as their base. I think they think we're going to be energized, and I think they're wrong on all 4 counts. Congressman, do you want to add? Oh, you know what? I should get you in front of the mic.
We have sent our impeachment resolution out for co-sponsor.
It's on, yeah, it's on.
We've sent our impeachment resolution out several times to get co-sponsors, and I think we have, is Jared still here? What do we have, 2 or 3 people? Almost nobody. And we send them out, and we send them in forceful manners. I think they're just, and I'm amazed on John Roberts, I don't think we got anybody. And we sent things, we sent out a censure resolution on Trump for the racial cartoon he put out about Barack and Michelle making them look like monkeys. And we got to think, we didn't get the Black Caucus people to come back to us. I'll tell you what I think, and maybe it's me. I don't think so. I've got a lot of friends. But I just think they don't work it hard. They don't work. I have my staff send me suggestions of legislation to co-sponsor. I look it over and I'll co-sponsor them. I don't think they do that. I don't know, but for some reason, there's not a whole lot of that in there.
I just want to ask Steve, is it possibly the money from leadership that is
He asked me if he thought leadership and money that they give people running for re-election was the reason that they won't co-sponsor. Leadership is everything. And I've never pursued leadership, but I do know, somebody told me, I think I'm going to write a book, and they said you should write about how Congress works. Well, I don't know if I know how Congress works, but I know some ways it works is to raise money and to help leadership and to stay in line. And it's not been my course. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I think we should all be encouraged by those poll numbers. They're not definitive by any means. I'm almost old enough to remember the headline in 1948, Dewey wins, from the Chicago Tribune. Our next speaker is from Free Speech for People. You should know the organization. They've done yeoman service in collecting signatures, petitions, calling for the impeachment of Mr. Trump. I think the number is well over 1 million. And they have been unreluctant to use their resources and to engage in the kind of public advocacy that's necessary for us to prevail at this particular time. So if you want to come up, and she can explain, the details of what she's accomplished so far and where we're headed. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Suparna Reddy, and I'm Senior Counsel at Free Speech for People, a national nonprofit dedicated to defending democracy and our Constitution across the country. For more than a year and a half, we have led the campaign at impeachtrumpagain.org, demanding the impeachment and removal of Donald Trump from public office for his hundreds of impeachable offenses. More than 1 million people across the country have joined us in this campaign. Thank you to Ralph Nader, Bruce Fein, and Francesco DeSantis for organizing this important event. and inviting me to speak on behalf of Free Speech for People. Let's set the ground. Trump should have been impeached on day one, based on his violations of the domestic and foreign emoluments clauses when he refused to divest from his business interests around the world prior to taking his oath of office, and based on his corrupt campaign practices in the 2024 election. But he wasn't. Since then, he has committed a series of impeachable offenses against the United States, our Constitution, and the people of this country. He has made us complicit in war crimes, in crimes against humanity, in crimes against our own people. He has undermined the judiciary, usurped power from Congress, and turned our Department of Justice and law enforcement agencies into partisan weapons targeting Trump's political opponents and those who speak out against him. Let us be clear. Congress should impeach and remove Trump for each and every one of these hundreds of offenses. And we have a duty to record his every abuse of power. But in the process, we should not miss the forest for the trees. Trump is intentionally and systematically dismantling our democratic institutions to consolidate his own power and line his own pockets. The framers designed a constitution with defenses against tyranny, but these defenses only work if the checks and balances remain intact, and if politicians and the public officials who make up Congress and the courts uphold their oaths and stand up for our Constitution. Trump's impeachable offenses are wide-ranging and numerous. We at Free Speech for People have documented more than 25 categories of offenses. But today, I will be focusing on the ways in which Trump is attacking our First Amendment freedoms of expression, speech, press, and association. And I will discuss the ways in which these attacks further his larger goals to strategically dismantle our democracy and establish an authoritarian regime under his command. As Frederick Douglass noted, freedom of speech, of all rights, is the dread of tyrants. It is the right which they first of all strike down. Trump has not hesitated to attack the freedom of speech. He's gone after political opponents, arresting and threatening to arrest people like Governor Gavin Newsom, Senator Alex Padilla, and Newark Mayor Ras Baraka. He's attacked prominent critics, including late show comedians like Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel, by trying and succeeding in getting their shows canceled, even if temporarily. As an ancillary attack on the freedom of speech, Trump is attacking the press to control how information is disseminated. He has weaponized the FCC to threaten news networks to stay in line or risk having their licenses revoked. He is arresting journalists and controlling who gets to hear executive briefings. He is using one of his favorite bullying tactics, meritless lawsuits, to bring media companies in line, all while pocketing undeserved millions through so-called settlements with companies whose financial well-being he has significant control over. Through his control of merger approvals, Trump is clearing the way for companies he has corrupt relationships with, like Skydance, to expand their media empires and aggregate their monopoly power over news. All of this helps him more easily control the major press in our country. These profit-driven media executives are complicit in chasing more dollars in exchange for harm to democracy. Trump's approach to media control also shows how his punishment of dissent goes hand in hand with his purchase of loyalty. Trump has created an unprecedented culture of corruption that enriches business leaders who support his regime. In exchange for large donations and personal financial benefits, he is basically selling pardons to his supporters, all of whom were found or pled guilty of serious corruption crimes. Trump's crypto businesses, which have enriched him by nearly $2 billion, create an easy mechanism for those seeking his favor to enrich him through pay-to-play schemes. In this environment, press freedom becomes just another victim in the art of the deal. The front lines of Trump's assault on freedom of speech go beyond boardrooms to the streets themselves, where he is violently suppressing the voices of people on the ground. Law enforcement and military units under his command harass, abuse, assault, and detain nonviolent civilian protesters, while his prosecutors bring politically motivated criminal charges against them. He has issued orders to target people for arrest and prosecution solely because of their speech, beliefs, or associations. And in his immigration operations, he has unlawfully arrested, detained, and canceled the visas and green cards of people specifically because they support causes he doesn't like. This highlights a second important feature of Trump's authoritarian playbook and a familiar strategy of tyrants across history and continents. Trump has co-opted ICE and CPB as his own personal secret police to suppress dissent and spread fear. They serve him, not the American public. These officers, emboldened by Trump's confidence in them, are operating with total impunity while armed with military-grade weapons. These agencies control vast sums of taxpayer dollars, which they then use to terrorize those very same taxpayers. In the process and under Trump's authority, these paramilitary forces are flagrantly violating the First, Fourth, and 14th Amendments to the Constitution, for a start. As Trump's personal police, ICE and CPB are carrying out his every unconstitutional whimsy. They're kidnapping, assaulting, and endlessly detaining protesters and dissenters. Early in his administration, we saw this tactic used against people like Mahmoud Khalil, Mohsen Madawi, Rumeysa Ozturk, and Badr Khan Suri, people who had supported causes Trump disfavored. We watched as ICE and CPB were deployed against democratic states and cities to frighten communities that Trump disliked. As part of their terror regime, these agencies are using advanced but imperfect technologies to track and intimidate activists and journalists on behalf of Trump, including using apps that allow for social media surveillance and facial recognition. And enhancing their terror, ICE remains anonymous. They cover their faces with masks, they wear civilian clothing, and they refuse to provide identifying information. And let's not forget, ICE and CPB have murdered peaceful protesters in cold blood, like Renee Good and Alex Preddy. And those agents have yet to face consequences. They have shot and killed innocent people going about their daily routines, like Ruben Ray Martinez, Lorenzo Salgado Araujo, and Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero. This unpredictability is not a bug, it's a feature. Trump abuses the power of these agencies to sow terror among our friends and neighbors. Fear shuts down reason, survival takes precedence over principle, would-be dissenters stay quiet, and the grip of the authoritarian tightens. The lack of consequences for violent ICE agents points to a third feature of democracy that Trump is trampling as he silences his opponents, the rule of law. The rule of law means that no individual, institution, or government entity is above the law. Everyone is equally protected and equally accountable for their actions. When the Trump administration shields investigations into murderous ICE officers while redirecting resources to investigate a victim's partner, that is a failure of the rule of law. More than that, it is a weaponization of our justice system, something Trump has ramped up noticeably in his second term. Using the Department of Justice and Department of Homeland Security, Trump's revenge tour has included harassing journalists with subpoenas at institutions like the Washington Post and Wall Street Journal, unnecessarily probing investigations into law firms, industries, and universities to control their internal and external messaging, and blatantly politically motivated investigations into his opponents, like Governor Gavin Newsom, former FBI Director James Comey, New York Attorney General Letitia James, and Senator Adam Schiff. But it's not just big names and institutions that are feeling the vengeance and bluster of Trump's Justice Department. Trump is trying to suppress grassroots dissent against his policies by designating protesters and dissenters as Antifa, as terrorists, and as criminals. And then he tries to generate criminal charges against them. When prosecutors refuse to bring charges, or when investigators don't say what he wants to hear, they're fired. Trump has also attacked the judiciary, the third branch of government, an intended check on presidential abuse of power. If a judge rules against his interests, they're subject to his public tirades and threats of impeachment and criminal charges. All of this is a transparent attempt to silence opposition and destroy the rule of law. Thus far, Trump has not succeeded in every attempt he has made to suppress speech and expression. But here's the thing about tyranny. You don't need a 100% success rate to achieve your goals. You don't even need to hit 50%. By going after a few people unlawfully and unconstitutionally, Trump has now raised the cost of public participation, the cost of speaking up, the cost of making a case against him. He has placed fear in the hearts of those who know he is wrong, but worry now about the consequences of pointing it out. But note that each of his actions also galvanizes his opposition. With each step he takes towards tyranny, more people are impacted, and that has a ripple effect that wakes up the public to his schemes. More people realize now that he is not their savior, he's a despot. The framers worked hard to throw off the yoke of King George's tyranny 250 years ago. Today, we are faced with a similar struggle. But this threat is not external, it is internal and insidious, having taken over our executive branch, captured our judicial branch, and reduced our legislative branch to servility. Checks and balances can still work if we are able to achieve collective action. There is a way to stop Trump's tyranny in its tracks. We have a constitution that is well equipped to unseat a president who commits treason, bribery, and countless other high crimes and misdemeanors. The constitutional remedy is impeachment and removal. As we approach the end of summer, there is a great danger that Trump will escalate and use ICE and CPB to attack our most sacred form of democratic expression, the right to vote. He has given every signal that he plans to use his secret police to intimidate voters and sow chaos during the upcoming midterm elections. Holding Trump accountable cannot wait. Congress must act now. Trump swore to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, and yet he defiles it daily. But people forget that the members of Congress also took oaths of allegiances to defend the Constitution. Each member who protects Trump from impeachment violates that oath. To get Congress to act, we the people must show our elected representatives that they have a mandate to take action. We must use our voices loudly and collectively, again and again, until we are heard. Free Speech for People is leading a movement aimed at doing just that. Joined by more than 1 million people across the country, we will continue to build our impeachment campaign at impeachtrumpagain.org, and we urge you to join us. The people demand this. Recent polls have shown that a majority of Americans want Congress to impeach Trump. Ms. Lake just confirmed that for us. We applaud members like Representative Green and Representative Larson and Representative Cohen who have introduced and supported articles of impeachment. Congressman Green has twice forced a roll call vote on impeachment, creating an important form of accountability and transparency over who is taking their oath seriously. Already, 1/3 of the House has voted in favor of impeaching Trump. Free Speech for People continues to call on members of Congress to introduce articles of impeachment and force their colleagues on the record when it comes to impeachment. Each day that goes by is another opportunity for Trump to normalize his grift and greed, all while dismantling our democratic institutions, silencing his opposition, and herding us towards domestic tyranny. We cannot wait until he has accomplished his goals. We must act now to save democracy. Congress has the duty and the ability to impeach and remove a corrupt executive, and it must impeach Trump now. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm pleased and honored to introduce our next speaker. I think I could describe Joan as the Patroclus of Ralph Nader, the Achilles, collaborating with Ralph in his most heroic and gallant efforts. Joan has made enormous sacrifices to appear here today. And I think she should be a model for all of us after this event concludes, to work without tire, without weary, to push for impeachment and removal. I don't need to explain why that's imperative. It's come before. But think about this. There is no doubt in anyone's mind that if we take a look back at July 4, 1776, the current President of the United States would align with King George III against the 56 signatories of the Declaration of Independence. And that ought to convince you time is of the essence. Joan Claybrook, take over.
No. Okay. Good afternoon. This is a lively group. Very, very important people here to discuss this matter and to get the word out about the importance of impeachment. My name is Joan Claybrook. I am speaking about the loss of human life from the overt refusal of the Trump administration to implement the life-saving programs administered by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the U.S. Department of Transportation, just one of the agencies that he is helping to destroy across the government that do the work of the people. I served as the administrator of this agency in 1977 to 81, appointed by President Jimmy Carter, someone we can revere as a president. And thereafter, I was president of Public Citizen, which was founded by Ralph Nader, and I was president for 27 years. It's a consumer and advocacy organization. NHTSA is responsible, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, you have to call it something, so we call it NHTSA, is responsible for saving tens of thousands of road users and motor vehicle occupants every year from death and horrible injury. It's amazing what the work of this agency has done, and it started with Unsafe at Any Speed, written by Ralph in 1965. And I met Ralph in 1966, so I think I can claim that I know Ralph better than anybody else in this room, and maybe around the country, and I've worked with him for 60 years. The motor vehicle standards that the agency has issued include airbags, which I am proud to say I had something to do with, seat belts, rear backup cameras, collapsible steering columns, rollover protection, strong tires, and so much more that over the years have been really, really important to the daily protection of occupants, pedestrians, cyclists involved in crashes and serious injury, and also saving expensive and painful health care. Yet the agency is grossly underfunded. It was devastated by DOJ attack in the first year of Trump's second term, with a 25% cut in its personnel, which had already been cut over the years. In fact, the spending power in 2026 of this agency is 50% less than in 1977, when I served as head of the agency. This is a drastic cutback given the enormous increase in the number of cars, trucks, drivers on the highway, and the increase in miles traveled. The agency has not issued any federal motor vehicle safety standards since Trump became president, since he was sworn in January of 2026. The current NHTSA administrator, Jonathan Morrison, served as general counsel of the agency in the first Trump administration, so he is intimately familiar with the agency's programs, authority, and capacity to save lives. During his career, he also worked for auto industry entities. Since taking office in the second Trump administration, he has overtly stated that he will focus on highway safety programs, that is, primarily issues dealing with belt use, speeding, driver behavior, but not motor vehicle safety standards that have been credited with preventing millions of deaths and injuries since enactment of the law in 1966. While President Trump accumulates billions in personal wealth during his presidency, NHTSA is starving. While 95% of the transportation-related fatalities involve motor vehicles, NHTSA historically has only 1% of the overall DOT budget, and these days even less. And on average, over 100 people are killed every day on our roads, with over 36,000 killed in 2025. This amounts to an almost 20% increase in just one decade. So it's been going up. But motor vehicle safety standards have been shown to have prevented more than 860,000 deaths, 49 million non-fatal injuries, and damage to 35 million vehicles. And that's a small number. That's not all the data that is available, but it's what has been accumulated. The comprehensive societal benefits of NHTSA's vehicle safety standards in 2019 dollars amounted to $17,000 trillion. So it's a huge benefit to this nation, and it should be praised and funded and encouraged. Wall Street would look very fondly to having that kind of a payback on its investments. The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, an insurance-funded group that supports auto safety, estimates that passive impaired prevention technology, this is for alcohol and drinking, will save more than 10,000 lives a year if it were deployed. And it's now available, but it hasn't been deployed. Now, drunk driving costs the nation about $68.9 billion a year and $296 billion when also counting the societal harm and the quality of life. For years, it's been illegal to drive drunk. All new vehicles should be equipped with technological solutions mandated by federal law to prevent operation of a vehicle when the operator is drunk. But NHTSA is not allowed to do anything, including that. Likewise, automatic emergency braking systems should be required on all cars or trucks, and many people don't know what this is. But what happens is when you're about to have a crash, the brakes automatically apply, even if you don't do it. They actually slow the vehicle down, so the amount of injury that occurs, or the possibility of death, is drastically reduced. Now, Congress directed that the NHTSA issue a final rule for passenger vehicles for automatic braking that even can detect pedestrians, not just vehicles. And they estimated that it would save, just in the first year, 362 lives and mitigate 24,000 injuries annually, and result in $5 to $7 billion yearly cost benefit. That's just amazing in the first year. And if you all have ever been in an auto crash and have experienced the terrible injuries and the harm and the hurt and the disability, you would know how important this is. And then the automatic emergency brakes can also reduce not only front but rear crashes with injuries by a whopping 56%. NHTSA studies show the vehicles being produced now already meet these, some vehicles already meet these requirements in the full automatic braking rule. But the industry has sued to further delay implementation of this life-saving requirement. Again, for heavy trucks, where it's even more important to have automatic braking because these trucks really do damage on the highway, NHTSA has delayed issuing the AEB rule to rewrite it to accommodate the industry objections and their desire to save what? Cost. Their costs. Not your costs, their costs. In addition, other driver assistance safety standards, some of which are now being installed on higher-end cars without any standard being required, but the companies are doing it on their own, that the major companies like Mercedes and BMW and so on. They're critical to saving lives. For example, could dramatically prevent drinking and driving that kills over 12,000 people a year and injures so many more. Also, NHTSA has taken little action on regulations to mandate intelligent speed assistance, driver impairment, and driver distraction. The ultimate result is their failure to issue these requirements is another program called the New Car Assessment Program, something I started, which alerts consumers of the safety performance of the vehicles. Even though it doesn't require a change, it alerts them to how the vehicles perform. This program was invented by NHTSA in 1978 and was initially very effective, but incredibly, it has been adopted by other countries, 9 other countries, including in South America and Asia and so on, and including particularly the EU, the European Union, which has required testing and publication of the results for cars and vans in 12 new safety categories, while the U.S. hasn't issued any of them, none. So our program, which we invented, is now being carried out by the EU, and the auto companies have too when they do it in Europe, because they don't want that publicity to reveal that they're not doing it. But the recent EU information about auto safety for front airbags, for example, between the occupants, there's no airbag that comes between the occupants in the front or the back seat, was recently publicized by Anna Warner, a correspondent for Grey TV. And when the EU has put this into their public information program and required performance information by the auto companies, they will upgrade their vehicles to incorporate the new safety technology. And they're doing it in this one. The U.S. is woefully behind in securing such improved safety, and of course the Trump administration cruelly has no interest in saving lives on the highway one way or another, in which Americans are suffering. Auto safety advocacy organizations have produced reports and public testimony documenting Trump's failures and the cost in lives and injuries of not implementing existing laws to protect the public, but to no little avail. Nothing will change until there's a new government in charge in America. Thank you.
Is our last speaker? No, it's not. The next speaker, Kara Havens, the Executive Director of Citizens Impeachment. Okay, I have faux pas here. I need a correction. Who is? Oh, I thought we have Phoenix Resurrected. I apologize for, we thought maybe there was going to be a cancellation. So, William Hartung, former Senior Research Fellow at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. I think the Quincy Institute is named after John Quincy Adams. He gave a very famous July 4th, 1821 address to Congress that we should not be racing abroad in search of monsters to destroy. But Mr. Hartman will explain really the out-of-control Defense Department under Mr. Hegseth, which we learned about earlier. And we're very pleased that he's made himself available to us, because I think it is a critical component of the urgency of impeaching Mr. Trump. And what I've said is, even if our empire in our lifetime does not disappear, we have set a standard now of international lawlessness that will come back and haunt our posterity, our children, our grandchildren. We've basically said, if you're powerful enough, it's legal to invade any country you want to invade, destroy the country, commit war crimes with impunity. That should be shocking to all of us who care about those who yet to be born. But William, want to make your presentation now? Thank you.
Well, needless to say, I'm honored to be here. Bruce and Ralph say it plain. which is unfortunately rarer than it should be. When other institutions are bending the knee, they're fighting the power. And we need more power on our side, and that's what things like this are about. For years, going back to the 90s, I guess, not to Eisenhower, although I was 6 years old, I could have watched his speech. I've been documenting the immense power and influence of the military-industrial complex. And not that long ago, I finally realized telling people how powerful the other side is does not mobilize them, it scares them. So I've been spending at least the last 10 years working with younger colleagues, asking organizers what they need to do their work, learning from them. And now there's some, people like Michael Clare, who was a mentor of mine, who wrote Who Rules Colombia, Mike Locker, who did research on bank loans to South Africa. They're still working. Michael's writing a book on AI. Mike Locker, corporate data exchange, still happening. And miracle of miracles, they are meeting and talking with people coming out of the ceasefire movement, which is great. You could imagine a different outcome, like, well, young people, you got to do it my way. Well, except my way has led to a proposal for a $1.6 trillion Pentagon budget. I think I need help. And there's help to be had. There's a lot of seeds of change out there. I do stand-up comedy for fun. And I have my one-person show is called I Get No Respect. My life as a failed foreign policy pundit. But it's kind of a joke because, of course, one person isn't going to change all this. But I was on Bob Scheer's podcast, and he's a great journalist. He's still doing this. I think he's about to turn 90. He wrote this book, With Enough Shovels, where he talked to a Reagan civil defense person, and he said, aren't you worried about nuclear war? He said, no. We have some shovels, we throw some doors over, and we're good. So Bob was very influential in the surge of anti-nuclear activism in the 80s, but he's a bit discouraged. I don't blame him. But I was on his show, and he said, Bill, you've been doing this for 40 years, and things are only getting worse. And I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, we're all going to die. I said, I know that, Bob, we're all going to die. But if this is what you're thinking, maybe take a beach vacation, because it's not working to mobilize people. And I could say the same of myself. But the Pentagon, you don't have to do research anymore about corruption because they're bragging about it. Testosterone Pete, as I've been calling him, his idea, there's two problems. One is give away the store to the contractors. We need to do things quicker, which is a recipe for waste, fraud, and abuse. And his crusade against DEI is really two things. One is if you're against DEI, you're for racism, misogyny, and anti-gay and anti-trans discrimination and violence. And I don't know why, outside the pages of the Capital Citizen, I don't know if there's any media outlet that'll just say that. They treat DEI like it's some argument over bathrooms or language, or God forbid you got to, remember somebody's pronouns. I have a solution for that. I call people by their names. But anyway, it's also the way they purged anybody who would stand up to Trump. And Hegseth is a perfect example. Who better to run this huge, complicated bureaucracy than everybody's favorite Fox News host, who ran a small veterans organization into the ground and now is trying to tell us how to run the world? I'm not having that. I mean, this war with Iran, apparently, according to Maggie Haberman, even Hegseth had slight doubts. But since his whole reason to be in power is to be a lapdog to Donald Trump, he couldn't go too far. Apparently, Vance said it would be a boneheaded idea. Trump did it anyway because he thought it was going to be like Venezuela. Kidnap the leader, add water, you get a pro-U.S. regime. And he was, pleasantly, he was surprised by the fact that Iran, whose government we have manipulated going back to the installation of the Shah, knows how to fight back. And they're fighting back with cheap drones against $2 million cruise missiles. And we have one cheap cruise missile, which is based on an Iranian design. So we're spending $1 gazillion in research development, and our best weapon was designed by Iran, which spends maybe 1/100th of what we do. And this gets to the heart of the mismanagement problem. The Pentagon's job is to make money for contractors, not to defend us. And it's completely self-evident now. Golden Dome is a marketing scheme, not a defense plan. Way back under Reagan, he said we'd have this impenetrable missile defense. And Edward Teller whispered in his ear about lasers in space. Well, lasers in space didn't work because the lasers dissipated. But Time magazine had a mock-up of the laser in space, and some people thought it existed, but it was created by the Pentagon's art department. So now, all these years later, they haven't even done a realistic test, which would have to involve, first of all, these tests, they tell you when they're launching it. An adversary's not going to say, hey, we're about to bomb you. Well, Trump might because he's an idiot. But anyway, or a few days ahead so as people could bet it on the policy markets. So they've never done a realistic test. Every physicist who's not on the payroll of the Pentagon knows you can't have a leak-proof defense. So Trump doubled down. Oh, yeah, we'll block missiles, we'll block low-flying cruise missiles, we'll block drones. It's going to be this big, beautiful thing, which is a sign with Trump that it's the most awful idea you've ever heard. And so he said they could do it for 3 years, $175 billion. The F-35, which was supposed to be a big deal, is 23 years old. They're still fixing it. It's in the hangar more than half the time. Golden Dome will underperform the F-35. And according to the Conservative American Enterprise Institute, could cost $3.6 trillion. It's closer to a confidence game than a defensive scheme. But the beauty of it is Lockheed Martin makes the hardware, Elon Musk or one of them makes the software, one big happy family. You know, as long as there's enough money, they can all cash in, even though they're allegedly rivals. It's like, you know, the breakup of the bromance of Trump and Elon Musk. Well, Elon Musk still launches all U.S. military satellites. He's got a big launch pad in Texas, which is trying to grab public land. Thankfully, there's a group suing him for that. But, you know, there's, you know, maybe you could knock out a few drones. This thing is completely absurd. Then there's the Trump-class battleship. And, of course, he's named everything in America after himself. And most of the things that he named after himself are failing, like the chunks from the reflecting pool, which a friend of mine sent me the thing where they were selling them, which I thought was real, but was not. Get a piece of America. Anyway, the Navy's been looking for smaller, more nimble ships. And Trump, it's for Trump, it's got to be big. So CSIS, which is awash in contractor money, said, this is the stupidest idea I've ever heard. But since it's named after Trump and it's big, they're going to try to build it. So they have, it's like procurement by narcissism. It's not even thought through in any way, but also bigger, fancier, more sophisticated weapons generate more money for Lockheed Martin, for the tech bros and the women who support them, mostly ideologues. So there's that. And then there's if you look at the results, Roger Wicker has a generational investment in peace through strength, to which I say, where's the peace and where's the strength? We fought 20-year wars against the adversaries fighting with bombs set off by their telephones. You know, in Afghanistan, they had ghost soldiers who didn't exist, and the commanders were skimming off the money. That was our side doing that, and also giving guns to the Taliban. So it's not really the way to run a war, needless to say. So anyway, it's not working as a defense strategy. Well, this is a shocker. In 1 week, I was on Jon Stewart's podcast and Newt Gingrich's podcast. And Newt Gingrich agreed with me about everything. I mean, not, you know, hatred in politics or his other crazy ideas, but he used to be head of the Military Reform Caucus, and they had this radical idea, if they're going to make weapons, they should be usable on the battlefield, simpler, less expensive, things like the A-10 attack aircraft, the F-16. I don't necessarily want a more efficient military. I want a strategy where we're not using it all the time. But this Military Reform Caucus had 100 members in the 80s. They helped turn back the worst of the Reagan buildup. So at the end of the podcast, Newt Gingrich thanked me for my service as a veteran of losing in the peace movement, I guess. But it's like I thought I was in a parallel universe. And I'm not sure I could accept him agreeing with me. But I realized it was a very narrow agreement. But nonetheless, there's a lot of people who realize this is bonkers, but they're afraid of Trump because he's like Henry VIII. One day you're his friend, next day off with your head, or you get deported or so forth. Well, you know, bullies, you know, bowing down to a bully is infectious. So is standing up to a bully. And more people need to do that and do it now. And I think they are. And I thank them for that. So we're not alone. And some of the best people I know are in their 20s. I befriended one young woman who was writing about how they were subsidizing arms to Israel. And somehow she introduced me into her circle. And I mentor in writing dozens of young people. And then I started asking, the woman who's writing the Pentagon budget campaign, 28. Our advocacy director, 28. One of the best writers I work with, 27. The kid she mentored, a fantastic journalist. And they're all either about Palestinian rights, Israel, fighting back against the tech bros. But of course, some of them are interns doing better work than I am. Some of them are baristas. I have an intern who we wrote a thing that was in the special issue of The Nation on AI, short articles on Lebanon that were used by Rashida Tlaib in a war powers resolution. She's making $16 an hour without benefits, and she's turning down TV interviews because she was working as a barista. So I can't tell you where I'm going next, but I'm going to hire her at a real salary. It's priority one. But there's dozens of these people. I have a friend a couple of years ago said, well, Bill, you write so much, and who's going to replace you? Only hundreds of young people. And so we need to make them welcome. We need to build a community that they're part of. I said to, not everybody's going to get paid to do this. I have a very peculiar job. Who gets paid to criticize the military-industrial complex? But since I haven't cost them a dime yet, I'm like entertainment to them, even before the comedy. In addition to trying to hire more people and raise more money, we need to build a community. They need to feel included. They need to come to our conferences. They need to have a seat at the table when we make strategy. And they're going to have to fight this fight. I'm 71. So if I'm like Ralph, I got 20 years. Or I could get hit by a bus tomorrow on my trip to London, because they go the other way. So that's one of the reasons I work with young people. The other is they know things I don't. They tend to be intersectional. They have bigger goals. If you work in a conventional Washington think tank, your goals become so small, they're barely worth fighting for. I was on a call where a guy, the chair, offered some really modest amendment, and he said, well, we're going to lose anyway. And one of his younger colleagues put in the chat, you got to stop doing that. So these folks are ready to fight for change, and under much more difficult circumstances. I was in the divestment movement in South Africa. Not a lot of defenders. These kids are being suspended. Their organizations are being defunded. I live by Fortress Columbia, which is protecting their students from free speech and doxing and letting people be kidnapped off the campus for standing for Palestinian rights and against genocide. There's now what I call the Columbia visa. I'm allowed to come on campus if I genuflect adequately. But there's a new Palestinian restaurant in the neighborhood, and the menu says, end the occupation. So I'm going to spread the menus all over campus. Ideally, I would like to be arrested and make it go viral, because I'm old. I'd get some sympathy. And I would just say, hey, kids got to eat, So I'm only half kidding about that. But I met a young woman at the Malcolm X Museum, which is in the Audubon Ballroom where he was murdered. She was a junior in college. She studied with Malcolm's daughter, Ilyasa, and there's a mural of his life, and she was surprised I knew of all the examples. And there was a thing from Birmingham. I said, well, that's really more Dr. King. And afterwards I said, it's got to be hard to be in college now because they're trying to drive out everything we need to learn. It's almost like you need freedom schools. She said, oh, we have that already. So every time I turn around, there's something good happening. And people come to me because they think I know more than I do, and then I learn from them, and I try to connect them. And I'm grateful for that. So the Pentagon, to put it briefly, is a cash machine for contractors. They want to get rid of independent evaluations. They want to move things faster. They've got these things called other transactional authority, which basically say, all right, over 10 years, we'll give you $20 billion, and we're not going to keep track of whether you're actually delivering. I talked to a reporter today from ProPublica and I think the article will be out soon, I'm not scooping him, but General Dynamics got money to build an ammunition plant in Texas. Because, of course, if you subsidize genocide and the war in Ukraine and start boneheaded wars, lo and behold, you run out of ammunition. If you have a sensible foreign policy, not so much. But anyway, 2 years later, they haven't produced a single artillery shell. The machinery has caught on fire, and now they're giving them a new contract. It's like the Pentagon's worst dysfunctional practices on steroids. Don Trump Jr. is on the board of a drone company, and the UAE and Saudi are messing with our foreign policy. Trump's $4 billion or so that he made, a big chunk of it was the UAE buying into one of his crypto funds. Silicon Valley gets money from unhinged venture capitalists, from the UAE, from Israel. So the $1 trillion in our book was outdated already because Trump wants 1.5. But we're going to make stickers. You can change it with the tides. But it's not just that. It's the venture capital firms, and if they fund something, they want it to get Pentagon contracts. They call it the Valley of Death, from where you get the little contract to where you become the next Palantir or whatever our trillionaire Mr. Musk is calling his company now. But anyway, and then there's the Saudi and UAE's funds going into venture capital. They're going to own pieces of these companies. One of our biggest cybersecurity firms was started by an Israeli spy who now has information on all of us. So it's like, on the one hand, you can't keep up. On the other hand, because they keep bragging about it, the research is a tad easier. Like I watched a hearing about this congressional commission. I probably should stop there, right? I feel like I've been going on for a while. But anyway, a commission on strategic posture, which was designed to put us to sleep and almost worked. But it was populated, the majority of the members were making money from the nuclear industry, including John Kyle, the biggest opponent of arms control in the history of the Congress, who also happened to be a lobbyist a while back for Northrop Grumman, which makes the nuclear bomber and the ICBM. It was not mentioned in the press coverage. And then the hearing was basically members saying, yeah, well, we make the only missile that can intercept hypersonic weapons, or we got to spruce up the Nevada test site. Or the guy from Alabama is like, hey, we make everything. We make offensive missiles, we make defensive missiles, bring it on. Then finally, Senator Warren, one of the 26 members, said, just out of curiosity, what is your plan going to cost? John Kyle said, cost is no object, unlike every other goddamn program that they're cutting to the bone. Pardon my language. And she also said, they didn't say a word about strategic posture. I mean, in theory, they should have talked about, do you have too many nukes, too few, is this? It was shameful. I mean, the idea of calling Congress a deliberative body is like Donald Trump calling himself a genius. But it could be if we took the money out, if we took the lobbyists out, if we took the revolving door out. Now there's a few strong champions like Elizabeth Warren, Mark Pocan. This new crop coming in is going to be fantastic. But they mostly know about the Middle East. They're going to have to know about how the Pentagon budget works, China. They're going to have to know how Congress works because they're trying to block them in the Rules Committee every other way. They're going to try to besmirch their reputations. So we got to get behind them because this is the most promising movement in Congress we've seen in a long, long time. In my neighborhood, just north of me, a machine politician was taken out by a 29-year-old who was in the ceasefire movement at Columbia, which was great. But imagine what it's going to be like for her. So she's got to learn the ropes quickly. And there's actually a group forming that's trying to boil down all this wonky progressive foreign policy stuff into the talking points and briefings these folks need to stand their ground. Because I don't know if you remember, AOC went to the Munich conference and fumbled the question on Taiwan. Well, why wouldn't she? I mean, she's not armed services. It probably was, they put her in front of the wrong panel. She should have given a speech about people power over corruption or something that is in her wheelhouse. But we need all those new folks to know how the Pentagon works. And there's some promising signs like Jewish Voice for Peace and Adala Justice, which is a Palestinian rights group, have been making calls against the Pentagon budget. They didn't used to do that. But if we don't stop that buildup, they're going to eat our lunch, destroy our democracy. It's not going to be pretty. And of course, all of this comes more or less from the same sources. Palantir was accelerating Israel's ability to do bombing runs, also same in Iran. They also militarized the border. They also help ICE find and kill people. They also have an unhinged founder who says we're all the Antichrist. Well, if it's his Christ, yes, I'm anti, because his Christ is divisive. If it's the Christ that loves people and thinks they're all precious, I'm on board with that. And so, on the one hand, they're coming at us fast. As Steve Bannon said 8 years ago, it's about muzzle velocity. If you shoot 6 bullets, 4 of them will get through. And loyalty oaths and muzzle velocity and unhinged narcissistic behavior are a summary of what the Trump administration has added to the problems we were already dealing with. And I'm not having it. I know you're not having it. The younger generation's not having it. And so we have to build, not just speak truth to power, but build the power to take back our country. And I think events like this are about that. So I think I'm probably done. I mean, I could go on at great length, and I did with Henry Hilton, who's writing a piece for Capital Citizen. Smart young journalist, kind of person I love to talk to. But, you know, we got to go back and do the work. You know, I did a book event once that was on C-SPAN with Eisenhower's grandson, packed the house, was on C-SPAN, sold 12 books, because a lot of people viewed it as entertainment. Well, we have plenty of entertainment, much of it bad, but every one of us needs to think about what we can do. You know, I often get asked, you know, Bill, how do you take down the military-industrial complex? Well, just because I know how they make their money doesn't mean I know how to organize a precinct in Toledo or move a religious organization or organize a union. So everybody's a leader in some way because you have different experiences, different networks, and we're going to have to change the politics of this country before ideas like mine have a fighting chance, at which point you're going to ruin my comedy routine. But I can take that. I have a neighbor who says, oh, Bill, if there's world peace, you won't have a job. I'm like, yeah, Dan, I have other skills. Don't worry about it. Whether it'll be achieved in my lifetime, I don't know, which is why I'm working with the younger generation. So I have spoken enough under my theory of that we have to, other voices have to rise up. 71-year-olds should be given a time limit. And so I thank you.
Yeah, Bill's remarks remind me of a statement Andrew Jackson once made in response to a question, what was a majority? He said, one man or woman with courage. And at least one illustration of that was someone who's come to be known as Tank Man in Tiananmen Square. So it's capable, and we need to take those examples as our model. I think our final speaker this afternoon is one who's trying to populate Congress with the kinds of backbone that we've seen with Congressman Cohen, Congressman Thanedar, those who I think William Harting would be eager to support. We need new blood. I think that it's unfortunate that people oftentimes come to Washington, they're like, Mr. Smith goes to Washington in the movie, but they don't stay that way. And they get along because that's the easiest route. So it's important to attract candidates who are eager to come for the right reason, with a certain energy level. I know it's difficult. I was working with the gentleman. We were searching for at least 6 months for a candidate who would make the Constitution of the United States the centerpiece of the campaign, not whether the Democrat or Republicans. And to be candid, we couldn't even find one. There was a little nibble at a candidate out in Illinois until AIPAC started to pour in the money, and then the Declare War Clause had to change its stripes to empower the president to do anything they wanted. But Kara Havens, is she here in the audience? There we go, great. She is the one, she's the future. Unfortunately, I think myself and Ralph may be museum pieces, but she's the future there. And give your presentation.
Just appreciate it. Hi, folks. Can you hear me okay? Excellent. My name is Kira Havens. I'm a U.S. Air Force veteran. I'm the founder of Citizens Impeachment and the co-founder of Courage for Democracy. The last time I was here in April of this year, I was asked over and over again, where are the new people? And I am here to tell you about those new people today and how we are tackling impeachment. I'm just a little bit younger than Bruce and William, and so I'm pleased to be bringing in that next generation. I started Citizens Impeachment in April of 2025. We have been doing this for 18 months. Just like Celinda Lake said, we knew it from the start. I am not a politician. I'm a scientist and a veteran, right? But I swore the same oath that every member of Congress swears, to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And at that moment, in April of 2025, when we were at weird tariffs and people getting fired illegally and Liberty Day, that was enough for me, a citizen, to say, this is it. This president is unconstitutional, anti-constitutional, needs to be impeached. And it was easy to find people to come with us. We found 1,000 people in the space of a week willing to email their representatives. We had one person in every single congressional district. And we drafted an article of impeachment on tyranny. That article is in Shri Thanedar's article of impeachment resolution, HRes 353. It exists. It is there. We did that. In a week, we did that. 3 weeks later, it was on the floor of the House, ready for a vote. And then what happened? I'm sure y'all can guess this is Steve Cohen's talk, right? Leadership stepped in and said, no, we are not doing that. We are not going to have a vote on impeachment. Not now, not ever. Jeffries is still saying this. He is still in the papers saying impeachment is not a priority. And in fact, when I spoke with Representative Thanedar today outside this room, he said he was not going to bring that article of impeachment to a vote this term. He is going to wait till after the midterms. Despite that speech he gave, despite the fact that he has put 3 impeachment resolutions to the Judiciary Committee, he is not going to force a vote on them because leadership does not want it to happen. For me, this is unacceptable. So after many, many meetings with Congress, with constituents, asking them, are you going to take any action? Will you impeach? Will you use Rule 9, the rule that allows any member of the House to bring a privileged resolution like impeachment to the floor for a vote within 2 legislative days, just like Al Green did? Will you do that? The answer over and over again was no, not till after the midterms. So we started Courage for Democracy. Because if these folks here in this Congress do not have courage, I'm going to find people that do. And Courage for Democracy was able to bring together 150 candidates that were pro-impeachment. 2 of them are, well, one of them is in the room now. 2 of them were in the room this morning. We have now yesterday was Arizona's primaries. We have 19 of these candidates headed to the general election. That is at least 13 million people that get to vote for Courage on the ballot in November. Everybody has agency. Everybody has a role that they can play. Everybody can take action. As a private citizen, I can say, man, there are a lot of things wrong with what's happening. In fact, I wrote several articles of impeachment: tyranny, treason, obstruction of justice, and of course, corruption, right? Members of Congress have more power than that. They need to do more than say things. They have to take action. Courage is an action. It's what you do after you say the words that really matters. And every single member of Congress is able to take action. They are able to introduce articles of impeachment, and they are refusing. That is why we have brought in people to take their place. Because that, at the foundation of it, is democracy. If the majority of Americans want impeachment, well, then the folks representing them need to pursue that. And if they don't, they need to be ready to give up their seat. Thank you. So that is what I do. I stand up and I refuse to take no for an answer. And then I find other folks that will also have that same mindset as they proceed. And what we could use is your help. We could use your help, your connections, your resources, and your time. Because we are new and we are coming in from outside. But we absolutely have the determination and the grit to make this happen. And I can vouch for every single one of those candidates that are headed into that general election. They are going to introduce articles of impeachment. They are not going to waffle, and they are going to follow the courage of their convictions to impeach, convict, and remove this president. So please do come talk to us. We'd love to work with you, and we'll be real happy to build this movement. Yeah, go ahead. Karen, stand up. If you'd like to talk to someone who's taken that pledge, this is Karen. You can come say hi. She's one of our courage candidates. Thank you, folks.
We have some additional time here to entertain questions from the audience. Maybe, what possible next steps there may be. You may have more granular details that you'd like to consider. But do we have a microphone for anyone in the audience to raise a question? Or if we don't, just speak loudly as you have a megaphone. Yes, this gentleman here.
Bill Day. So over and over today, we've been hearing that the problem is leadership. That our current leadership, that Jeffries and Schumer, their idea of action is a strongly worded letter. And we need more than a strongly worded letter. So if that is the key to making change, what do we do about the leadership?
No, I think we live in a digital age. Press the button. Press the.
You're good. You're good.
I'm good now? Okay. But I participated at that time with Ralph in citizens movement that succeeded spectacularly. It was called Watergate, and the compelled resignation of Richard Nixon for obstruction of justice, abuse of power, and refusing to comply with a congressional subpoena. And what really propelled the articles of impeachment that moved forward and would have resulted in his conviction if he didn't resign on August 9th, 1974, was the citizen response to the Saturday Night Massacre. You may recall, it's October 20th, 1973. A call is received by Elliot Richardson and the Justice Department. The voice is Alexander Haig. Your commander-in-chief has given you an order, sounding like it's a country that we dare not mention. Anyway, Mr. Richardson did not comply with the order. Ultimately, Archibald Cox was fired. The so-called Saturday Night Massacre, the Special Prosecutors Force, however, remained intact. But after the firing, there were tens of thousands of telegrams. This thing cost you $2 to send a telegram at the time, into Congress and the White House saying, no, you have to continue with the special prosecutor. You have to go forward with the impeachment hearings, the Watergate committee hearings, and it happened. Tens of thousands, right? What does that mean today? It means everyone in the audience, day after day. You can go to a local district office, you can email, you can call on the phone, you can text message, and if something doesn't happen in that member's office, you call back the next day. Where are you? Why are you not doing this? Over and over and over again. You can obviously use the U.S. Post Office as well. That's probably less effective because the post office goes at such a Testodian pace these days. But that's individually, it may seem small, but collectively, don't worry. It'll sound like thunder of a hammer on an anvil. And it needs to be day after day after day. No time for intervals. But it doesn't take a whole lot to make a phone call, send an email, send a text message, and talk to your friends to do the same thing. They hear that over and over again, and then they may change their mind. That's what happened ultimately in Watergate. Now, the other thing I think that would be useful for all of you, if you have a member, demand a town meeting. Come and talk to us. They represent you. They need to explain if they're not moving forward with impeachment, why. They're supposed to be representative of all their constituents, not just a handful, and require them to defend themselves. Another opportunity, and maybe it's different today with newspapers, at least the hard copy, diminished in their importance compared to social media, but go and sit down and demand a meeting with the board of editors of your local newspaper. How come you're not editorializing on this particular issue? Even if you don't succeed, the fact that you've made the effort will have an influence. Yes?
How do you explain, the question I asked Celinda Lake, how do you explain the fact that 90% of Democrats in the country want impeachment, but there's no spine in Congress among the House Democrats to do it, except for a handful? One, and as Kira said, she went outside and questioned the congressman after he made this eloquent speech. And he said, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
After saying, after presenting, indicating to us that he was. So what's the explanation for that?
Well, like a question given to the oracle at Delphi. I'm not sure I can have a complete answer, but I think I can at least give some clues. One is there is the money issue. The leadership controls the Democratic, Congressional Campaign Committee money, and many members need that money to campaign. But I think equally important is the fact that on both sides of the aisle, we've basically had Congress have a dictatorial internal structure where the leadership controls what committees you sit on, controls, if you have a bill, whether it comes to the floor, whether you can have an amendment. I think Congressman Cohen mentioned that. The leadership has become top-heavy. That can change by the rank and file. But I think it started to become very acute when Newt Gingrich became Speaker in 1992. But you're sitting there, so you have the choices on the Ways and Means Committee or Appropriations Committee or on Ethics or Small Business Committee, and you're into the hinterland. Because at least right now, with the way the two parties are organized, you can be sent to Siberia and diminish.
Why doesn't the leadership see it as a winning thing if 90% of Democrats want it?
Yeah. So the question is, how come leadership doesn't get it, that this could be a winning card? I think that, in part, it's just their minds are like a petrified forest. I think they believe that impeachment didn't work against Clinton, and therefore we never want to do impeachment again. They're not philosophical. I don't see they recognize change. So they're living in the past. And I remember in 2006, when Nancy Pelosi became House Speaker, the first thing she said is impeachment is off the table. This is at a time I was trying to obtain impeachment articles against Bush and Cheney for the torture and whatever after 9/11. I said, impeachment's off. What do you mean? It's right there in Article 2, Section 4. Did you airbrush it out of the Constitution? But anyway, that was the kind of timidity that was present at the leadership. Just because you've been in politics doesn't mean that you can't make really, really huge political blunders. It happens regularly, and you ultimately then are voted out of office. So that's the only explanation I have. It may be wrong, but at least it has some plausibility to it. This lady here, and then we'll get to you.
Hakeem Jeffries, I seem to remember Hakeem Jeffries was on the record as saying it's really complicated. You can't just impeach him. It takes months and tons of work, and you've got to do all this research. But everything that we've heard in this room seems to suggest quite the opposite, that you can absolutely
This is I can tell you, being involved in impeachment, this would be the easiest impeachment ever. You just use his own words and action. He boasts about impeachable offenses. I mean, this is Nixon. At least there was some effort to conceal even the White House tapes or whatever. You had to get subpoenas. This is open and notorious. When a president, in my view, when a president tells you, "I have the right to do anything I want as president," it's impeachable. You don't wait around at that point. You don't have to wait till you're pushed off a cliff to save yourself. And he says, the only thing that constrains me is my mind, my moral conscience. I mean, what more do you need? And then he follows it up with these statements, well, I'm going to obliterate a country on my own, 6,000 years. Even the Rubaiyat goes, but I don't think he knows the Rubaiyat, so he wouldn't know he'd be destroying the Rubaiyat in the Persian culture. So the idea that this would be complicated is candidly absurd. This, in my view, you could vote immediately based on his own words alone and go to a Senate trial. You don't need any witnesses. He's already his worst witness. So I think the complication is just a pretext for doing nothing. This lady here.
I was just going to comment, I remember the
Sure.
Saturday Night Massacre, as many of us in this room are old enough to. And yes, it was an influential thing, but I also remember the father of our ex-governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan, being a Republican, coming out and supporting impeachment.
Yeah.
And that was a real break for them.
Yeah. And William Cohen,
Who's working on Lisa Murkowski or whatever Republican might be there to actually stand up and support it.
yeah, well, it was true. I mean, he wasn't the only Republican, too. I mean, William Cohen of Maine also is a Republican. I mean, the ones who actually pushed Nixon to resign was Barry Goldwater and Hugh Scott, the leadership of the Republicans in the Senate. They're the ones that went to the White House and said, you don't have a chance here. The best candidate we have at present, as somebody knows, is Thomas Massey. He won't be in Congress again. He clearly understands the unconstitutionality of all these crazy wars that he votes against. But we're working to try to make it bipartisan. That the optic is important. I think this lady back here, and then.
I'm Joanne Hall. Thank you so much for your presentation today and to Ralph and the Center for leading this discussion. I guess, having been around Washington, my question is, maybe it's not whether we get impeachment, it's when we get impeachment. Let's just say hypothetically we stay focused on the midterms right now. We keep the leaders strong, Jeffries, whatever, whoever, right, to do what we need to do, because the most important thing is to try to take back the House and the Senate. Trump most likely will do something, as you point out, to deploy ICE, National Guard, do something that even Americans who only care about their kitchen table are going to sit up and take notice. He may or may not be successful, but the chances are bigly that he's going to do it, right? So we come out of the midterms, if we lose, we've got his example right there along with all those words, and that hopefully fuels a movement of, okay, we have to get rid of this guy. It's our only choice now, right? We failed to take back the House and the Senate. If we win the House and the Senate, great. We still start the movement for impeachment. And we use as proof what he just did in the elections, even if he failed to overturn them. So we work with the strategy of the leaders right now, but we do the impeachment movement, we lay all the groundwork right now, and we have it locked and loaded for after the midterms, no matter what the outcome.
Well, I understand and appreciate that perspective. I think that it's a luxury that I don't think that I'm comfortable with, because Mr. Trump could do something tomorrow to blow up the whole planet. It's not beyond him with regard to Iran. Anything that he could do, that we would, before Trump 2.0, you just couldn't believe that anyone would order these kinds of crazy things that he's doing on his own, sending people to dungeons in El Salvador without due process. Who knows? He could issue an executive order like happened in World War II and create up concentration camps for all of his opponents. Now you say, well, that seems remote. Well, if it's that staggering, I don't want it even to be remote. And he's clearly committed impeachable offenses. The other observation I have, I think people generally, they like courage. They like people to stand for something and to sit and wait around and said, well, he's committed impeachable offenses, but for a political calculation, let's not go forward now. Then it makes you seem, well, you just want to stay in office. You're not really about principle. Now, I understand reasonable people could disagree on that score. And I don't even want to take the risk of the midterms being postponed, disrupted by the Insurrection Act. I mean, this is the United States of America. There was a big risk on January 6th of 2021. We almost lost the country. They were chanting, hang Mike Pence, with the President of the United States sitting there, well, he probably deserves it. That was a close call. I was within 50 yards of what was going on. I was doing some interview at that time. Why are we willing to take a risk of that sort? You don't want to take a risk of that sort. That's the whole purpose of impeachment, to avoid it before the catastrophe comes. I mean, that's how I view things. Even if I had just wanted to encourage a takeover of the Congress in the next session by Democrats, I still think the way to do it is to have backbone now. I do not think that that the Trump people are going to come out more than they already would for Trump, because they're fanatical, because you issue articles of impeachment. There isn't anything more you can do to these people. You know, they want to run a crusade or however big Hegseth. But anyway, thank you for your comment. I appreciate it, this Jim.
Is there a foreign country that's influential that might just want to keep Trump in office?
Well, of course, it's Israel, for sure.
Do you think that's weighing in on Jeffries and Schumer? And
Yeah, I do think it is. I think it's AIPAC. I mean, I talked to my friend Thomas Massey has said, every member of Congress except him has an AIPAC handler. They're up there all the time. They spent $30 million in this campaign. So I believe that, in fact, and I was working with a candidate running for the Congress from Illinois on ways in which to rein in ICE and to stop some of these crazy wars. And then suddenly AIPAC came in and gave her money, and that was the end of the conversation. So I think there's without a doubt that the leadership is certainly impacted by Israel. And you can read The Israeli Lobby by Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt that gives you even a more granular level. It's existed for a while. But I absolutely believe that's why they don't want to push too far on Iran, because then it's going to implicate Israel. This lady in the orange sweat.
Movement we're trying to build against this, and I wanted to really appreciate what you were just saying and what she just said, because to quote Bob Dylan, there's no time to speak falsely now, the hour is getting late with all of this, you know, and we, you know, we actually live under a fascist regime in this country. The last shoe has not dropped yet, but it's getting, you know, what I see is it's getting in preparation. One of the things that wasn't mentioned here is the Prairie Land case, which many people don't even know about. But these people were arrested for events that happened at a protest that, for most of them, weren't even involved in. We're talking about sentences of 30 to 100 years for a protest, for basically speech, for ideology, and not for the actual acts that people took. And I think then we have Iran, where right now events could lead to world war. You know, I mean, we are talking a very heavy situation, and then all of it's being prepared around the elections, where they're basically saying they're not going to run the risk of losing the midterms. And so I think I share the, there's an urgency here where impeachment, and what I'm hearing is, how is this going to be different? I'll put it that way. How is this going to be different? And the way I see it, and it's why I'm with this organization, is there has got to be people mobilized in the streets, not just once every few months, but around the demand that Trump must go now and the whole regime must go now, because he can't be doing what he's doing without the backing of a whole movement that's been in preparation for decades, actually, and he's just the wrecking ball behind it, you know. And that's what I want to share in terms of how I feel about it, the urgency that, if we're in Germany and we're not trying to work through the functioning of government that's being torn up in order to stop something that's coming, a bulldozer that's coming down on our heads, and right now the machinery is so torn
Okay, I think we get your point here. Yeah, I mean, I think that we can at least anticipate the possibility of a burning of the Reichstag moment. Remember, that was in February, a month after Adolf Hitler took power in January 1933, that then led to the excuse to shut down the Reichstag and rule by decree. But I think also it's important to understand impeachment is not the French Revolution and the guillotine. It's not sentence to prison. It's nothing more than The Apprentice. You're fired because we can no longer trust you with the stewardship of our liberties. That's what it is. So this idea that says this is a military coup d'etat, wait a minute, that vastly overstates what we're really about here. And remember, I mean, I was in the transition when Nixon left office. Gerald Ford came in. He was the vice president. Was there any lack of continuity? He came in? No. I disagreed with his pardoning of Nixon, but the country didn't fall apart. What's this idea that somehow impeachment is like a revolution, like the storming of the Bastille? It's not. Now, under the Constitution, if there's an impeachment and a removal, the vice president, which would be J.D. Vance, would take over. But I can guarantee you, if J.D. Vance didn't change the ways from Trump, he'd see, you're going to get impeached too. Don't worry, his tune would change very, very fast. And anyway, that's how this system works. So it's not like you're handing the powers of the executive branch from a Republican to Hakeem Jeffries. No, it stays with the Republicans. I mean, they could keep his own cabinet there. But the larger point I'm trying to make is, why are you suggesting that this is like running to the barricades, you know, in the French Revolution? It isn't that way. I think we might have time for one more question, maybe, and then we have to wrap up here. We certainly appreciate everyone's engagement and willingness to participate. Yes, sir. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I have a question and I have two comments. Number one is that the points that I've heard that I agree with, because it's that we're going to lose civil society, and I'm only saying civil because we're going to lose fragments. That's my concern. For people who didn't vote, and for friends of mine, I'm a minority here today, that it's not that, I mean, people, there needs to be more of an effort made for voting education. I mean, people are suffering, but it has to, some effort has to be made. Now, I don't call often, and I don't have, I mean, I'm from Maryland, but I don't live in there, so I don't get to vote, but in Maryland. But I called the White House for the first time since Al Gore, before Gore came, okay. And I called when President Biden's press secretary said something that made my head spin around. And I said, you need to tell Mr. Biden that she's made a mistake and correct it. And I didn't understand at that time until later. I met with a friend, with a professor, I mentioned his name, at American University here. He said, oh, he's got 17 hawks giving him advice. And I said, well, you're going to lose. So I called the next day
Okay.
and I got
we have time limits here. It's like the basketball team or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. That's my point, that I think people need to call, and make it very clear to their representatives that you don't care what the money is that they're taking, they can go. They can be voted out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we agree with that. Education is important. We appreciate your comments. We appreciate everybody's attendance. We understand if we don't hang together, we hang separately. So I think that's pretty easy proposition to win. And see you soon. I hope that we can have a valedictory before November. Thanks again.